Guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be going through the books that I was able to get to in the month of June. So let's just jump right into it. So unfortunately, I did have a DNF for June, and this book is You Must Remember This by Kat Rosenfield. And unfortunately, it was yet another miss for my most anticipated books of January 2023. I'll link that video up above and down below for you if you're interested in checking out that video. But this book is about a woman in her 80s named Miriam who is suffering from dementia. One night she goes for a walk and unfortunately ends up passing away because she falls through some thin ice. And during a gathering of her family, everyone is speculating as to whether it was an accident, suicide, or murder. First off, I knew as soon as I started reading this book that I did not like the writing style at all. There was a lot of cliches, and honestly, in my opinion, just straight up were the hallmarks of bad writing. We're going to go over some of these right now in what I like to call the fanficky cliched checklist. Someone referring to someone else's breathing as sending a delicious chill down her spine? Check. It was like something out of a movie? Check. A character biting her lip when talking to someone who she's attracted to? Checkity check, check, check. Using the phrase, I peeled my eyes open? Check. Honestly, with this, I can only picture here someone physically taking two fingers and forcibly prying open their eyelids, or just taking like an apple peeler and peeling over their own eyes with it, neither of which sounds pleasant. And yes, I understand that the author was not meaning to be literal here, but you know what I mean. It's just the language is super awkward in my opinion. Going off of that, the narrator of the 2014 portion of this story named Dell, she's a grown woman and she honestly reads like someone much younger to me, almost like a teenager, and it was really difficult for me to believe that it was a fully grown woman who was narrating this. So besides Dell's point of view, we also get another perspective in this book, and it is that of Miriam when she was a little girl, and I'm assuming as the story goes on, it continues as she gets older, but I unfortunately didn't get far enough in this book to figure it out. I only got 40 pages in. Besides all that, especially during Dell's chapters, I was honestly bored to the point of actual anxiety. I was just reading and saw how many pages I had left to go and was thinking to myself, there's no way I'm going to make it through a book that is this boring. I remember being at work and thinking about coming home later and having to try to force my way through this book, and I just wasn't looking forward to it at all. I wanted to make it through for the sake of the page count and counting it towards the number of books that I read in my Goodreads and Storygraph reading challenges for the year, but I honestly just couldn't do it. During Dell's chapters, the only action that actually happens is that Dell and her mother get out of the car, they meet up with Miriam and her caretakers, and then they walk into the house. Yeah, that's seriously it. None of the information that we're giving through Dell's narration seems to amount to anything, and I can't even remember most of the stuff that she was droning on about. Of course, we start to have a love interest because, of course we do. You know how I feel about unneeded love interests in mystery thrillers, so I'm not going to even delve into that. At the beginning of the book, we get a prologue, and it starts off with the scene of Miriam falling through the ice. But after I decided I was going to DNF this book, I decided to go ahead and skip ahead a little bit to see what I could of the rest of the book. And it looked to me that in the timeline of Dell's narration, Miriam actually falling through the ice in the context of the story doesn't seem to happen until rather far into the book. And there was no way I was going to read the boring things that Dell narrated about until we got up to that point, because I'm guessing that's when the actual plot starts. I think Miriam's chapters had the potential to be somewhat interesting, but I honestly couldn't see past the writing style. And of course, I can't not point out the irony of the title here. I will definitely not be remembering this book. I also went ahead and looked at spoilers for this book, and I'm glad that I didn't read because I would have been really ticked off because it seemed to be pretty predictable. I did write a book blog post about this book, and I will link that down below if you are interested in that. This book was not that entertaining, but I tried to make the blog post as entertaining as I could. Now, let's get into the books that I actually did finish. So, first off, we have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Now, as I mentioned in my June TBR, which I'll link up above and down below for you if you want to go watch that, this book I picked up because it was the book of the month for a book club that I joined, and I'm not sure I would have picked it up hadn't I have had to for that book club, but I'm honestly super glad that I ended up reading this book. I was super engaged in the book from the very beginning and was pleasantly surprised by how pulled into it I was right from the beginning. This book is about a woman named Dana who is living in the 1970s with her husband. And one day, while they're unpacking from moving into a new apartment, Dana is sucked back in time to the 1800s to a southern plantation and saves the son of one of the plantation masters. This son that she saves name is Rufus. And throughout the book and the course of this boy's life, Dana is repeatedly pulled back to this time period to interact with people on their plantation and save Rufus repeatedly also. Dana is black, and obviously during the 1800s, slavery is still legal, so this poses many problems for her. I honestly really liked Octavia E. Butler's writing style, and I thought the story was very engaging, fascinating, and entertaining. I think the nuance of the relationship between Dana and Rufus is explored really well. There were a lot of descriptions as to what Dana was doing as far as mundane tasks while she was working on the plantation, and sometimes descriptions like that bore me a little bit, but that was not the case at all in this book. I have a few petty criticisms, one of which being Dana and her husband being super accepting super quickly as far as traveling through time. But at the same time, if we had spent a whole bunch of time in Dana's head about coming to terms with this, I would have probably found that super boring and annoying. So I'm glad too much time wasn't spent on it, but I think it could have gotten at least a little bit more into it. That's something really small though, and I barely had any notes when reading this book, which for me is a good thing because it meant that I spent more time reading and enjoying the book rather than writing down what I didn't like about it. And I finished the whole book with the exception of the prologue within almost 24 hours. I started to watch the show immediately after putting this book down, but I turned the show off pretty quickly because I liked the book way too much to want to watch what looked to be a pretty poor adaptation. And while I would like to end this video on a positive note, I want to talk about these books in the order that I read them. And the final book that I finished in June was Tripping Arcadia by Kit Mayquist. As I mentioned in my previous video, this book has been on my radar for well over a year, and I was really looking forward to it. But unfortunately, it was a huge disappointment for me. This book is about a woman named Lena who starts working as an assistant for this doctor. This doctor that she starts working for works for a very important and famous family. And while she's working here, she discovers that someone in this family is responsible for some of her own family troubles, and she vows to get revenge for that. First off, this book is apparently a gothic novel, and while I haven't read any gothic novels to my knowledge, or at least not that many, I wasn't exactly sure what it was that made this a gothic novel, and I even had to look up the definition of a gothic novel to make sure I didn't have the definition wrong. Don't get me wrong, there were definitely times when the book gave me vibes, so to speak. Some specific scenes in particular are when we're in this mansion house that belongs to the super rich family. And there's also this one scene where Lena and a few other characters are out on the sidewalk in the snow in Paris, and that 100% gave me vibes when I was reading it. But other than that, it wasn't all that atmospheric to me. These scenes in particular, though, I was able to picture everything in my head, and I did think that was pretty cool. I must say, I thought it was kind of funny though, because for the first 2 or 3 pages of the book, we get this super flowery and descriptive language. But then after that, it goes away and pretty much doesn't appear for the rest of the book. I was really engaged at the beginning of the book, but towards the middle and especially towards the end, I was unfortunately really bored. I was annoyed by how Lena constantly talked crap about rich people, but yet at the same time was head over heels in love with Aubrey, who was the daughter of the family that she worked for. Lena does mention all the time that Aubrey wears expensive clothes and travels all over the world, but for some reason that's okay. Speaking of Aubrey, I honestly didn't understand what was so great about her that made Lena fall for her so quickly. She honestly didn't really have that much of a personality to me. I did, however, as I mentioned in my mid-year freakout tag, which I'll link up above and down below for you, develop a bit of a crush on John, who is Aubrey's brother. He loves to read and at one point actually drags his family to their childhood home, which is the mansion I mentioned earlier, just so he could sit there and read because there's this huge library in the house. And honestly, I thought that was super sexy. Lena kind of annoyed me though. As I mentioned, she's super hypocritical, and I don't want to give away any spoilers, but let's just say the view she has of rich people becomes quite hypocritical and ironic in the end. Also, I almost found her motivation and plan for what she wants to do to the patriarch of this family a little over dramatic, especially because she says that she wants to help her family with the money she gets from this job. But as soon as she gets the money, nothing was mentioned about helping her family, from what I read anyway. Also, her parents treat her super badly, and it just came across as a little bit unbelievable to me. Like, they treated her like crap for kind of no reason that I could discern. Like, she does go to Italy to live with her aunt, who's her mom's sister, but I don't know. She also drops out of medical school, but I don't really think that's necessarily listed as the reason why her parents kind of despise her a little bit. I don't know. Honestly, this book was so forgettable that I honestly can't remember. And that's not good. I wasn't happy with the ending of the book at all. I thought it was a little cheap, and honestly, it confused me a little bit too. But at that point, I was super bored and didn't even care to go back and try to understand every single little detail. I didn't hate the book though. In fact, I feel pretty indifferent about it. I didn't come away with much from it at all, and in my opinion, that's even worse than straight up hating a book. I am in the middle of writing a blog post about this book, which I will link down below once that's posted. Now, I unfortunately didn't get to finish The Coward and episode 13 like I was hoping to this month, but don't worry, they are definitely going to be getting carried over into July. Once that July wrap up is up, I'll link that video up above and down below for you, but I promise these will be in that video. So there we go. That's all I wanted to say for this video. Please let me know down below how your reading went for the month of June. I'd be really interested in hearing about that, as well as if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.